Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Barbie, directed by Greta Gerwig, of course co-written by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, starring the incredible Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, along with so many other incredibly talented actors that round out the ensemble that this movie is made up of, like Issa Rae and Michael Cera and Will Ferrell, and just so many other people that I'd like to mention off the top of this review. But when it comes to my actual expectations of this film, it was honestly extremely high because of my knowledge of Greta Gerwig as a filmmaker. Lady Bird is genuinely one of those films that I really love rewatching, and Little Women is also another Oscar-worthy film from Greta Gerwig. And when you give this woman a film and an IP that has, so much cultural impact on the world in both a positive and negative light, and you have that subversive quality that she has as a filmmaker and the potential of what she can do with that material, I was extremely excited for it. And I know some people are seeing this movie more so for the meme when it comes to the Barbie and Oppenheimer double feature. And even one of the friends that I watched this movie with tonight, also had that sort of thing where it was kind of the lighthearted thing that was kind of the palate cleanser before you get into the intense Oppenheimer that we're going to watch tomorrow. And so what the film did, which I'm really happy that it did this, and I hope it happens also with other audience members seeing this movie, is that it surprises them with that subversive quality, with the very clever and inventive script and the way that it tells its message in a very strong and powerful way. And I really love this movie. I honestly liked it more than I thought I was going to, and I had, again, high expectations because of Greta Gerwig. So of course this will be a spoiler review for Barbie, so if you've not seen this film, I highly recommend you go check it out, especially if you're doing the Barbie and Oppenheimer Whiplash double feature. I think that would be a really fun thing to do. But also, before I get into the review, I want to say that this movie could not have been done and could not be as subversive and as inventive as it is without the writers and the actors that are in this film. And all these people have been working so hard in Hollywood at a lower level to build up to where they are now. And with the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes going against the AMPTP, I will leave links that kind of explain the situation that also give you, ways to help the situation as well. I'll have all those links in the description down below, and I'll also talk about it a little bit more later in this review. But let's get into Barbie and all these spoilers that I want to talk about in this film. So what is the Barbie movie about? Well, you're following Barbie, who lives the perfect life, living the perfect routine. Every single day is perfect. Her hair is always perfect. Her food is always perfect. And everything is just very bright and shiny in the world of Barbieland. Until one day she starts to think about death. She starts to have this existential crisis and needs to go on this journey into the real world to find the girl that is, playing with her in the real world, to see what is going on, to figure out why she's feeling the ways that she is feeling. And this is just kind of the first 20 or so minutes that you did see heavily in these trailers, and this is just as colorful and bright and exciting as you saw in those trailers. I think the production design by Sarah Greenwood is genuinely phenomenal. I think this is easily going to be the winner for Best Production Design at the Oscars this year, along with costumes probably, along with some other categories I'm hoping this movie has a very fair shot at. But this entire opening stuff and everything in Barbieland is just perfect. It really is. The way that they move around and the way they, all the props and all these sets feel just straight out of Barbie. And, I know some people that really did play with these toys, and just from their reactions at the screening tonight, you can tell that the attention to detail here, even though I don't have that connection to this actual IP myself, you can tell that it is extremely genuine and very, very funny, because the way that she picks up her drink, and that's, it's a solid thing, and she pours it over her mouth and doesn't actually pour anything because it's just a piece of plastic. The way her feet don't lay flat and they're always up in that, heel position. The way that the clothes appear, and the way that everything kind of works, and the way that, Ken is running up to the water and bounces off the waves, and the way they just kind of fly around in very toy-like ways. It is extremely funny. And I think that's another thing about this movie that I found really, really great, was the comedy in this film. I think this is one of the funniest comedies I've seen in quite a few years. I was dying at so many of the jokes, and yes, this movie does have some adult-oriented jokes that are going to go over some kids' heads, and this is a PG-13 movie. There's honestly some jokes here that I am kind of shocked that they went with. I'm shocked that Mattel was, given Greta Gerwig the chance to make the movie that she genuinely wanted to make, with the jokes that she wanted to put in here. And there was a penis and vagina joke in here. The fact that, the Barbies and all the dolls don't have genitals. That was a very, very funny moment. I was genuinely shocked to hear in this movie, but it adds a sort of humor in this thing that feels, again, subversive. When you think about a Barbie movie and the idea of what it could be, and when you're taking this studio and you're saying, okay, we're going to take this big IP we're going to try to make the next Lego movie. We're going to try to have a quality like Elf where they're going to the real world and there's going to be some goofy moments. And the version of this movie that it could have been a lot more basic. You know, you could have had the ending where Barbie and Ken get back together and everything is all happy and cheery. But no, this movie does not go down the generic route, and it doesn't go the same way in the generic route where the comedy is. It is really subversive in the way that it, you know, handles its humor and its story. And really bringing that comedy to life is Ryan Gosling as one of the Kens. He is so good in this movie. I think that his comedic sensibilities is extremely underrated. He has some comedic moments in, of course, La La Land, but if you haven't seen The Nice Guys, that's my favorite comedy of all time, and he is so funny in that movie. He's also kind of useless in that film. Again, he's also just Ken in this movie, and he's also kind of useless here, but he plays that sort of role really, really well, and I just loved his presence in this film. All the jokes that he had, every single moment, honestly, made me laugh every single time. I thought him and Margot Robbie were also great together. Margot Robbie just carrying the drama, the emotion of this film on her shoulders, and it really, really does work. This movie is a journey about self-discovery. It's about Barbie learning to be human, to be flawed, to not be the perfect doll that she is always meant to be in terms of what she was made for. And I think this movie does ask that question, is what was I made for? Why am I feeling these things all of a sudden? And why is the people in the real world feeling these things? That's where it ties into America Ferrera's character, who is Gloria in this film. She is a mother to this young girl, and she kind of feels lost in this world. She feels like, you know, the weight on her shoulders, the pressure that she's feeling in her job, in her life in general, being a mother, and this daughter kind of feeling this rift between the two, and they're not really connecting anymore, and she just kind of wants to be a child again. She starts playing with these dolls again, but those feelings that she has, those existential thoughts that she has, is bleeding over to Barbie. And so these two characters and their storylines are kind of mirrored in a way, because those feelings that America Ferrera's character is feeling is exactly what Barbie is feeling. And so I think with these two characters and their narratives kind of being parallel to one another, you can kind of get insights on both of these characters through the journey that Barbie goes through in this movie. And, you know, I'll talk about one of the main criticisms that I've heard about this movie, which, you know, lies into some of the messaging in this movie being kind of on the nose. But when you have a character like Gloria in this film, somebody who has felt all this pressure all this time and just wants to let it all out, when she has that scene at the end of the movie where she's just laying it all out there, all the themes and all the messages that they want to say in a very on-the-nose manner. Yes, there is, you know, some movies that can have an on-the-nose message that can kind of feel a little bit hollow and not feel like it's impactful or just feel like it's pandering to the audience. But I don't think it's like that, because when you have a character that is so, you know, oppressed all this time and is so, you know, desperate to get this all out, you want that cathartic moment. And I think the main message of this movie is that, yes, you know, society wants women to be, you know, beautiful, but also not too beautiful. They want them to be smart, but not too smart. And this movie, you want this movie to have a strong message, but not too strong of a message. And I think some of the reactions I've seen from this movie is kind of proving the point of this movie itself, of people saying that the messaging in this movie is too heavy-handed, but if you don't have the message at all, then it's not enough. And so I just think that's a very interesting quality that this movie's bringing out of people and their reactions. But I also don't want to accuse every single person who's having, you know, some criticisms for this moment in the movie for it being on the nose, because I do think that messaging could have been stronger, mainly because America Ferrera's character hasn't had nearly enough time to develop up until that point to really have that emotional impact that I think the movie wants it to have, because you don't really get too much with the relationship between her and her daughter. You get a great scene, which is probably still my favorite scene in the entire movie, of Barbie sitting on this bench and she's trying to figure out who was the little girl that was playing with her, why she has to come to the real world in general. And she gets to see this little girl that grows up, that kind of has a disconnect with her toys anymore, and she becomes a little more like the moody teenager. And you find out later on in the film that the mother of this character was actually the character that played with those toys. But you see this relationship and this rift between a mother and daughter set up beautifully in this moment, and those single tear that falls from Barbie's eyes. It is generally a beautiful sequence. But after that, you know, she visits the little girl at the high school, and, you know, they have the whole moment where they talk about the negative side of Barbie's impact on the world, and you get back to her in the car with her mother, and they kind of drive off to go get Barbie, and all of a sudden they're all okay with just going to Barbieland all together, and the daughter doesn't really have too much conflict with her mother again. At that point, she has a couple looks, a couple lines in this movie that kind of suggest that there might have been more on the cutting room floor, but I just wish there's a little bit more here with those characters. But because the experiences of Gloria is so tied with Barbie's experiences in this movie and why she's feeling the things that she's feeling, it felt cathartic, not only because this character felt so oppressed that she wanted to, you know, get this all out there, but because you followed Barbie this entire time that has had all these feelings, and it does feel cathartic to just get it all out, to say all these things. And I think to have a character that's having an existential crisis, to take away their moments of catharsis would be strange, because what else do you replace this with? How do you make this subtle? How do you make a character that is so existentially, distraught? How do you have them complete their arc without, going all out there and just putting out all their feelings? I think it was a necessary thing to do, and that's why I'm okay with it being on the nose, because it needed to be. But getting back to the actual narrative of this movie, when Barbie goes off to go on her adventure with Gloria and her daughter, you have Ken going off to explore the real world and how men rule the world. The patriarchy is real. It is a real thing. And you see all these men with clipboards and suits in the gym high-fiving each other, and you get to see horses on the screen and men riding horses and cops riding horses, and he has this obsession with all of them. And, when you have Ken's character, a character who's really only good at beach, and you have this character that's, doesn't really have a place in this world, who's just kind of a simp for Barbie the entire time, which honestly, who wouldn't be? And so you have this character that's seeing all these things for the first time, in the way that Barbie's kind of the opposites of the real world, where the Barbies rule Barbieland. You have a President Barbie, you have a Dr. Barbie, and all the Kens are just Ken. And so when Ken sees all this crazy stuff, he wants to bring that back to Barbieland, because he can't get a job in the real world, because he doesn't have a PhD to become a doctor. He doesn't have the skills to be a lifeguard. He can't beach in the real world, but he can beach, and he can beach really well in the Barbie land. And so he wants to go back there and bring the patriarchy to the Barbie land, and that's kind of his storyline in this movie. And that's, again, brings a lot of comedy to this film, because you have all the other Kens, and it's when Barbie comes back with America Ferrera and her daughter and sees that they've kind of changed the entire Barbie land into Kendom, and you have all these funny moments with these characters kind of being a representation of what the real world is in the very exaggerated Barbie way. And now you have Barbie's character, who's always been the character that's had it all. She's always had the perfect life. She's always had all the opportunities and all the privilege that men have in the real world. And now she doesn't have that privilege that she's had all her life in the Barbie world. And she's kind of in the position that women are in the real world now, where, she feels like, the men rule the world, and she feels what Ken essentially felt throughout the entire beginning parts of this movie. And I think another message in this film is to live life in somebody else's shoes. And I think for men who watch this movie, I think that is also another important message for the men in the audience, because yes, this movie is very much geared towards women and young girls, but also, there's little boys that were excited to watch the Barbie movie. I work in a movie theater, and I heard that excitement. Of course, I was extremely excited for this Barbie movie, and I think the people that go to watch this movie that are men that can watch this movie to get something out of it, I think that is a good message, to live life in somebody else's shoes. And when it comes to movies and saying, oh, this movie's not for me, I think movies should be for everybody, in terms of like, you should want to experience something through the lens of somebody else, because if you watch a movie that only highlights your own experiences, I feel like that's boring. You want to experience things that you won't experience in your own life, because movies are a window into the soul of somebody else. This is a window into the soul of Greta Gerwig and what she wants to say as a filmmaker, and I think that is something that should be, explored by both men and women in this film. And I thought it was, again, another very well and subtle message that this movie has. And this leads to my second favorite scene of this movie, just behind the bench scene towards the beginning of the movie, and that is the I'm Just Ken song, which of course that song was released online, but of course the movie itself has an extended sequence of this entire thing. Of course you have Ken starting to sing, the Barbies are enacting their plan essentially to, have that speech that America Ferrera had to Barbie that kind of snapped her out of, the situation that she was in, and now they can go off and kind of manipulate all the Kens in the town to, do all these things that men happen to do in the real world in a very satirical way, and bring them off onto the side and kind of unbrainwash all the Barbies so they can go ahead and undo all the changes that the Kens did to Barbieland and try to save Barbieland for themselves. And you have all the Kens in the meanwhile starting to fight a war between each other, and they do the whole entire beach off scene towards this whole, I'm Just Ken song. And this entire I'm Just Ken song is about like 10 minutes long. It's a very extended sequence, and every single time it goes back to that song, back to the lyrics, I started laughing so hard. It is so funny. I cannot express to you how much fun I had watching the end of this movie, because it was lighthearted. It was a very fun palate cleanser for Oppenheimer. Of course, that movie's going to be extremely heavy with, its darker tones and its real world implications of what the atomic bomb, means to our world at large. But this movie is just a damn fun time. I had so much fun watching all these things, the humor, the goofiness of it all, it's absolutely bonkers and silly and a little bit trippy at the same time. And it really really worked for me. And the one thing that I haven't really talked about in this review is the whole Will Ferrell character and how he's the CEO of Mattel, and this movie kind of has a satirical manner of how it explores capitalism and how it explores these corporate businesses in a very tongue-in-cheek and self-aware manner, which honestly, first off, props to Mattel for allowing this to be made in the way that it jabs at themselves in a very self-aware manner. Honestly, I thought the idea of that was done pretty well. I do think that, yes, the real world stuff feels very grounded and real world, but the Mattel office feels very, like, it feels like it should belong in Barbie world versus the real world, but also that's kind of the point because they created Barbie world, and so it has that over-the-top goofy comedy nature where they're having that chase scene in Mattel where they're all, all the suits are chasing after Barbie, and it feels very cartoony by design because I think, they want these characters to have that cartoony feel to them. I can see some people thinking that it does feel out of place here, and I don't think that these characters pop up nearly enough to feel like they are the points of the movie. I think that if this movie was a more generic, Barbie film that was kind of based on the IP and was just kind of the Lego movie but Barbie, I think they would have had that president business character literally played by Will Ferrell being the villain of this movie. I don't think this movie has necessarily a villain. I think the villain is the idea that is presented in this movie, and that inner conflict that Barbie has. There's no direct villain of this film, and so when you have these Mattel people going after her, they're not really seen as the bad guys, especially once they get to Barbieland and they see everything that has happened and they want things just to go back to the way that they were. But President Barbie says maybe they shouldn't be exactly how they were before, because I think that we have changed from these experiences. Maybe the Kens can have a place in our, courts. They can have a place in our government in a very small manner. Maybe one day they'll have as much power as women have in the real world, which I thought was a very, very funny, subtle jab to the Supreme Court and our real world issues when it comes to women in the government. And so, I don't know. I felt like it was an interesting choice to not make them direct villains and to kind of have them just be a force of antagonism to kind of chase after Barbie, but by the end not really mattering too much. I think they could have been a little bit more prominent here, but I think if you were to make them more prominent, it would have taken away from the more subversive material that Greta Gerwig brought to this project. And so honestly, there's a give and take here, and I'd rather have the product that we have here with this movie versus the more generic route that they could have gone with the whole Mattel side of things. Another thing that I really appreciate about the ending of this movie, again, subverting expectations, you have Barbie and Ken not get together. You have a moment where they kind of sit down with each other and they have an emotional conversation where Ken is kind of breaking down and saying that all he's been doing, everything that he's done has been for Barbie, but he hasn't really understood that Barbie isn't the one for him, that he is Kenuff. He is more than Kenuff for himself. He's really good at beach and he's great at it, and that's all he really needs in life. He has his bros with him, and it's okay to be a Ken. It's okay to be a Barbie. It's okay for Kens and Barbies to do their own things, but they can also work together and be together in very beautiful ways as well. And again, another subtle message where men can be men and women can be women, and they can be themselves without this pressure of being what they need to be in the eyes of each other. And I think it's a very beautiful idea to have them not get together by the ending of this movie, to have Barbie go off to the real world and be human and try to learn all the things that she hasn't experienced in life, and going to the gynecologist at the very ending of this movie, which, God, there's so many jokes here that are so funny here. But again, I think it takes a lot more of a mature take and a mature filmmaker to go in this direction than the more generic, Barbie and Ken get together and live happily ever after that you would expect for a movie like this. But the last thing I do want to talk about in this review is, of course, Michael Cera. He is honestly the unsung hero of this entire movie. Yes, I know a lot of people are saying that Ryan Gosling stole this movie for most people, and I do think that he does steal every single scene that he is in. Margot Robbie is great in the dramatic moments. She is a wonderful actress, and she deserves, honestly, to be nominated for this role. I think that she has a good chance to be nominated. But my surprise, breakout star of this film, that shouldn't be surprising because, of course, Michael Cera has been always a great comedic actor. He is so perfect for the role of Allan. Every single joke that he had, especially the wall joke, was one of the funniest things where, they're building the wall to block off people from going to the real world, even though you can just, walk around the wall that they built. Or when he gets stuck behind the fence and Barbie says, just go around the fence. Just, what are you doing? Stop trying to jump the fence. You can just walk around it. That's such a funny running gag with this character. And just everything, his fight scene was also very unexpected and really funny as well. Just Allan. Allan's the unsung hero of this movie. He is the standout. He is the breakout character of this film for me. That is just, God, Michael Cera. Again, amazing supporting cast in this film. And also shout out to all the sex education actors that popped up in this film. I love seeing all three of them here. They're all just wonderful actors and actresses. But I think that'll be the end of my Barbie review. I think this is a very director-inspired Barbie movie that feels very much like a Greta Gerwig film in an unapologetic way, with her messages, with her style, with her direction. Everything about this movie, I think you can credit Greta Gerwig of just being an absolutely phenomenal director. And when you follow Greta Gerwig's actual experience as a filmmaker, you know, her writing some smaller scripts and kind of building up to a point where she was barely making a livable wage because of the things that she did with acting and residuals, and her entire experience as both an actress and a writer and a director, well, of course you're going to root for the WGA and SAG-AFTRA to get all the things that they want, because if you let the AMTP win and you let them do the things that they want to do with AI, you lose the creativity, you lose talent like this. AI can't make a movie that has this much, you know, character and this much, you know, humanity into it and so much, you know, life experience. This movie feels like it was lived in. It feels like it was made by somebody who has experienced life, and I think that is necessary for the art form of film. And so again, go into the description, watch some videos. I think I really will suggest the Dan Murrell video that's kind of explaining what the WGA strike and the SAG-AFTRA strike mean for Hollywood and for the future of movie making in general. I'll definitely link those down below, along with a foundation where you can donate for the support of these you know, filmmakers on strike right now, to support kind of the little guy, to support them to make livable wages that feel fair, because I one day want to go into the film industry. I want to be a writer, I want to be a cinematographer, I want to do all these things in an industry, and I hope that this strike can make the industry a better world for new early upcoming creatives like myself. So that'll be it for my Barbie review. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys enjoyed this movie. I'm very curious to hear all your guys' thoughts on it, so definitely comment down below. Leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you did enjoy this review and you want to see more just like this one. I'll have reviews up for Oppenheimer later this weekend, and of course I have reviews out for Mission Impossible. I'll have a review out for, you know, Haunted Mansion and Talk to Me later next week, which I'm so excited to see Talk to Me. So definitely keep up on the channel, subscribe, leave a like, comment down below, and I hope to see you all in my next one.